Well, hello, good morning, and welcome to the last event of emakumeak Zientzia 2020, a program of activities organized on the occasion of the International Day of Women and Girls in Science. We are here because still today, and besides the increasing incorporation of women to education and to the professional life, too many girls and women, and I am now quoting UNESCO, are held back by biases, social norms, and expectations, influencing the quality of the education they receive and the subjects they study. Women are particularly underrepresented in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM education, and consequently in STEM careers. According to the UNESCO, again, only a third of STEM students in higher education globally are women. This is a third. And only a third of the world's researchers are women. Data is similar in Europe, in Spain, and in the Basque Country. According to the data from Ikerbasque, in the Basque Autonomous Community, the proportion of women among researchers has only increased 5% in the last 15 years, from 30 to 35%. So it is a very slow increase. UNESCO claims that this gender disparity is alarming, especially as STEM careers are often referred to as the jobs of the future, driving innovation, social well-being, inclusive growth, and sustainable development. Diversity in research expands the pool of talented researchers, bringing in fresh perspectives, talent, and creativity. Women and girls play a critical role in science and technology communities, and therefore their participation should be strengthened. With this same purpose, this year, more entities than ever have joined forces to carry out the emakumeak Zientzia, or Women in Science program of activities in San Sebastian. It is the Materials Physics Center, the Donostia International Physics Center, TIC Biomagune, Tecnun, CEIT, Biodonostia, Eluyar, Polymat, and TIC Nanogune. And we have also received the support of other institutions, the Diputación de Guipúzcoa, Fomento de San Sebastián, the CSIC, the National Research Agency through its María de Maeztu program, the University of the Basque Country, and the Donostia Cultura, and we are very grateful to all of them. As I said, the roundtable we are about to start is the last event of this edition, but that does not mean that it is less important. On the contrary, these days we have been organizing a lot of activities. We have been talking to the citizens, to our neighbors, and we were trying to transmit them the idea that diversity in science and technology is something that it must be a reality, that we must build science without exclusions. And we have asked them to come to see our centers, to talk with our researchers, and to encourage their daughters, the next generations, to cross our doors and to stay with us in science and technology, to build a better future from diversity, from equality, so that the future also belongs to everyone. And we can repeat this message once and again, and we can do more activities, and we can reach more citizens, ally with more educators, journalists, policymakers, parents. We can do that, and we will try to multiply this message once and again, also in the future. But however, this will not be enough to change the inequality existing in-house by itself. This is why this forum is so important. It gives us the opportunity to stop, to look around, and think what we can improve and how we can do it. We have prepared some data and facts to discuss today with 5 women that are developing their professional career in science or very close to science and technology. We would like them to share their experiences and to answer, as far as we can, to these 2 questions. how we can improve these situations and what we can do. So let me present you our guests today. They are these women. Xana Belastegui is a CBO at Egiten Biotechnology, a company that is developing biotechnological products. She is a doctor in biological sciences, and she has worked in different public international research institutions. Naemi Leo is a Marie Sklodowska-Curie postdoctoral researcher at Nanogune, where she investigates magnetic materials and nanostructures. She is a doctor in physics, and she has worked in different research institutions in Germany, Switzerland, and Japan. Concha Alicia Monge is a doctor in industrial engineering and a professor at the University Carlos III, where she works in the robotics lab group. She came to San Sebastian to present the film Automata yesterday in the Science and Cinema program, and she was a scientific advisor of that film. Idoia Ochoa is a professor in Tecnun, a School of Engineers of the University of Navarra, where she is researching on computational biology and bioinformatics. She is a doctor in electronic engineering and has developed her career mainly in the USA. She just came back. Very recently, her professional path has been recognized by the MIT Innovators Under 35 Award. To start with the discussion, we will also later open... Oh, sorry, Maria. I changed the order because yes. Maria is a researcher in Polymath, and she's also a professor in the University of the Basque Country in the Faculty of Chemistry, where she is currently in charge also of the international relations. She is a doctor in chemistry, and her research is focused on the production of water-based polymer dispersions. Sorry, Maria. Thanks to everyone for accepting the invitation and for coming here today. So to start now, yes, with the discussion, we will later on open the mic for you too, if you have any comments or if you want to add some points to what they are saying, so that we can make it more interactive. But we will first give the word to our guests. I will show you first a graph. Is this one? This graph shows the proportion of men and women in a typical career in science and engineering. Here, we can see bachelor and master students, women and men. Here are doctorates, postdocs, or first-level university lecturers, and other academic staffs. So, if we see this graph, we can identify 3 points or trends that are quite clear. We have less girls that choose STEM degrees. Then there is a higher percentage of women that goes for the higher university degree, the doctorate, the PhD. And then the percentage of women dramatically disappears. Well, not disappears, but drops down. So today, with some variations, this data is more or less the same in Europe, in the world, in Spain, in the Basque Country. So as far as I know, we can take it as a reference today. 2 main problems are clearly identified. There is a disproportionality at the beginning, at the time of the election, and there is also a disproportionality towards the stabilization. So we will start talking about this graph. And first, we will focus on the election of the STEM degrees. So as we have 5 women that chose to take this path some years ago, I would like to know how they started to think about doing a scientific career, why this was tempting or attractive for them, and what was their experience when communicating this decision to their families or environment. So, if you want, anyone can start. We will not have an order.
Okay, I will start, okay?
Thank you, Maria.
So, for me, as we were talking before, the time that it get to decide what you have to do, it was a bit strange because I was hoping my parents to tell me what to do. And they told me, no, you have to choose by yourself because this is your life. So at that time, I was thinking of my youngest years in which my parents gave me a kimicefa, which was a very famous toy that there is still today, this toy. And I liked most of it, the colors I was getting from them. And I said, no, I will do chemistry, okay? It's also true that probably my lecturers in the high school had a high influence on this election, because if you have good lecturers, then you see that this is important. So I said, okay, I will choose chemistry. It's also true that it was close to home, but I liked a lot these colors, laboratory experiments. This is what guided me to choose chemistry.
For me, so I always loved mathematics, informatics, like I was with the computer. Not all the time, but I really wanted to know how it worked. I used to do like puzzles with my parents, like more like mathematical puzzles, not like regular puzzles. So I was also very inclined towards science, basically. And then when the time came to choose a career, I was between pure mathematics and telecommunication engineering, and I ended up doing telecommunication just because it touches a little bit more of everything. So it has mathematics, but it also has programming. So that's why I chose that. And in terms of telling my parents, there was no issue because they were very happy with the decision. So they always, encouraged me to do science if I wanted to. So in that sense, I never felt discriminated or that I didn't have support to do a science degree.
In my case, it was, sorry, because my voice isn't very good. In my case, it was very, very similar because, when I was very young, my parents gave me a computer, and it was accompanied with a book, with a code that I wrote in the computer, and finally I could see in the screen some circles with colors, and that was like very amazing for me. So I remember being there in the room with one of my cousins, and finally he's a computer science engineer. And also my father was a teacher in electronics, so I had that influence, right, in home. So I finally, but for me it was passion. I was very interested in knowing how a machine could work and why this language, right, to communicate with computers. And I was very, very anxious to learn how to program a computer to do things. So I finally decided to do engineering. For me, was the natural way to do something not natural to do.
So, okay, that works. Yeah, I guess for me it was something very inherent that I loved physics. I loved all sciences. My case was slightly different because I come from an artist family. My mother went to school in the 70s where she could actually unchoose math from her final years. So she hated math. If I had math book, but I was kind of doing the easy way out. I was the massive outlier in my environment. I really liked all kinds of sciences. And I remember then when I had to choose for my final years in school what kind of you have to choose a special course, a focus course. Mm-hmm. And I thought I love all sciences the same, and then I realized, no, I love physics, because in physics you make observation and you write down an equation that explains the observation, and that was very, very elegant. But up until university, I was very much alone with this passion. But it was very clear that I would do it, and I just knew I would study physics, but I didn't have any other plan. It was not I could envision a future as a scientist or a future, what it meant to be a physicist anywhere. But I did it, and I love it. So.
Hello. First, thank for the opportunity to be here. It's really nice to have this opportunity to be in the round table. So in my case, I didn't have any direction, any input specifically from my family. I had a little bit of examples of everything around in terms of professions. I didn't have either no one telling me, well, you better do this or you better do that, trying to direct me, which was good. I have to say that my mom, that she was an alone mom. She didn't have to do anything with science. She was more on the languages side. But it's true that since I was small, I always liked any game that had to do, with building things or puzzling things or understanding things. So she would always say, I'm like my little engineer, although I didn't study engineer at the end, I am biologist. But she always said this like in a very positive way, So I think that that stood there somehow. And then when I was studying at the school, I always felt more inclined and happier and could make easily anything that had to do with science, maths or biology or chemistry. I liked it to study that, to understand the mechanisms, especially in biology, to understand all the mechanisms in the organism and why things happen, like in enzymatic reactions and so on, and then go in detail and then go back to the whole picture. And I found this very very interesting. So although I would have probably be happy also in other science careers, it's true that that biology, when I chose biology and I started the career, I really felt very very comfortable there. So no one pushed me in towards that, but no one either tried to make me stop.
Okay, thank you. We will have some sentences that sometimes, because they are an example of the girls that decided to go for science, but of course we are talking about the other percentage of girls that don't take that step. So for that, it's true that we lack some people maybe on the table, but we will try to see why could be the reasons why those other girls didn't take the step as you did. So there are some sentences. These are very cliché sentences. I know that the diversity is also in these kind of things, but I have sometimes heard that girls prefer to study other topics, that science is very competitive, maybe too competitive for girls. Girls are not confident enough. Science is too hard. Or girls are better doing other stuff. And this is kind of a justification or justification we sometimes hear about the few percentage of women doing, especially some of the scientific branches like physics or mathematics or engineering, that are probably the ones that are more affected by these things. So I don't know if you have heard these things around. What do you think about these messages that sometimes we somehow unconsciously can transmit to these young girls?
Okay, well, very briefly, this is true. I mean, because this is what people say, right? So, in fact, historically, the role of women in life is a role more related to something social, right? We are more thought. The role is to be very social, to be very caring, and these kind of things. And for men, maybe the role is to be very supportive and to bring money to the house, right? And so on. So first of all, we have a role that we have to face and we have to change, because this is not a reality anymore, maybe, right? And also there is another thing, which is that science has the characteristic, or we define science as something difficult and quite abstract, right? And I think it is because we don't really know science. The way we have to I mean, when we first are in contact with science, teachers maybe also, they also say this is difficult, this is quite abstract, maybe you cannot understand this. And so I think for sure it is not like that. There are many ways in which science can be understood as something entertaining, interesting a lot. Yeah, so we have to change the roles, we have to change these kind of messages because they are not true, right? So there are many, many fields we have to face. It is not only that one particular one. That's the problem. There are many, right? So I think we need to change perspective and I think it is very important to make science more reachable for everybody. Because why children with just 3, 4, 5 years old, they say, maths, horrible, it's very difficult. You don't know what it is, right? So how could you have that opinion if you didn't study that? You haven't been in contact with that material, that stuff so far. So how could you say that? So something is happening.
Yeah, I agree with everything you have said. And I think all these sentences are incorrect. So I do not agree with any of those, but it's true that there is this role, like I'm watching now these days Mad Men, which is based in 1960s or 1940s, I don't know. And you can see that women were supposed to stay home, raise kids, and it has been like, I don't know, like 60, 70 years from that age, right? So you can see that there is, I believe there is an intrinsic bias in society still, maybe not in our generation, but I can see that with my kids, with my grandparents, for example, sentences that they say that I do not agree. And they have a bias over there. So I think we basically need to start very early in the childhood, just telling girls that they can do whatever they want. There was this experiment actually where they tell kids a story, I think they are like 3, 4 years old, about someone with a high profile, maybe a doctor or an engineer. So they tell a story about this person, and then they ask the kids, do you think this person was a boy or a girl? And at that age, I don't know, most of the girls tend to say that the person was a girl, and most of the boys tend to say that the person was a boy. I don't remember the percentages, right? Maybe like 90% or something. And then they do the same experiment with kids that are maybe like 7, 8 years old, so not that big. And at that age, already 90% of the kids, no matter if they are girls or boys, they already say boy. And that is a bias that they have since they are growing up. So I think having, a good atmosphere at home, or just in society where they can see that there are girls everywhere. And I noticed a lot of, in the US they are, investing a lot of money on this, a lot of research. So you can see that there is a difference already. So the other day I was walking in Chicago, there was the North Face store, just to give an example. The whole publicity of, outside the store were women doing like rock climbing, playing basketball and stuff like that. And it seems that it's something very little. But as a girl, if you are walking through the store and then you see a woman playing basketball or doing rock climbing, then you believe that you can do that. And the same will apply for science as well.
Maybe I can, sorry. Okay, so I think we all agree that science, for the most part, is actually doing its work for society in one way or the other. And it's kind of, it's kind of in addition to what you're saying. I think it might be wrong to just target the children, because you have to target everybody and actually make it sure that it's inclusive for everybody. And recently, on Christmas, I was home in Germany and I was filing through old stuff, and I found like a catalog for experimental boxes that was printed in the 90s. And there were parents, so actually there were fathers with their boys playing as photos in this catalog, and it's like, yeah, I always wanted to have such a box, but I didn't feel included. And I think these sentences, I also see them there. They're kind of just like the result of this picture that women do not appear in the science, in the representation. It's having role models, or just seeing that it's possible. But I think just saying, okay, if we tell little girls they can do it, but they don't see anybody that actually does it, it will not work. So we have to.
No, I was going to say that this can be heard, but at least in my faculty, we don't see this 30%. I mean, we are already at 50% but I would say that in all levels, because we have 50% of students, undergrads, doctorates, postdocs, lecturers, and even the dean is a woman. Okay? So maybe it's just chemistry, but I think maybe we are already starting the change. Which is great.
Yeah, there are differences. I will just go through the slides, if I can, because related with that, sorry, but there are differences from degrees. This is a graph where we can see the differences of women studying different disciplines within the STEM degrees. But it is true that there are some disciplines like chemistry or biology where more women are, the percentage is even higher of women in those disciplines. The general trend, however, is also going up somehow. Down.
It will stabilize. Maybe the problem is more in physics.
Yeah. There is a big problem in physics, that's clear. And
we're just dragging everybody
in
down.
engineers, that is not represented here, also the numbers are very, very slow, very, very low. So, of course, yeah, there are differences from one to other disciplines, but the average, also you are putting physics upwards in the general numbers, no? So, why do you think is that?
If I can add something on specifically on this graph, because all the things that they were commenting before, I mean, I agree with that. I think there is a cultural thing, and we need to change a lot of those messages, and especially answer them when they come. Okay, when someone makes some of those statements, why do you say that? I don't think it's like this. Why I don't think it's like that. No. And in my case, because I'm a biologist, so I am on that line of the top. Okay, 64% could be a student, but last year when Nora and me, when we came to give a talk here also regarding female representation in some of these fields, we were putting together some numbers, and for example in the biotechnology sector, just in Spain, the numbers of women that work at companies, at biotechnology companies, as laboratory or researchers, could be around the 50%, could be, but then when you start moving on the next levels on those companies, the percentage drops the same that you were showing in your previous slide, on the previous graph, and is not. I mean, there are many of those positions that are women or men coming with a technical background, because even if you are, like my case, that I moved to the business development side of the activity, is really relevant to have a technical background. So you really see that in those positions also there is a drop. So even if we start very good like that, I don't think that we always maintain a high percentage, even, I mean, closer to 50%. So then we need to think what is happening in the next steps, as you were saying, no, in the stability period.
We can go to that now if you want, because you have already identified some of some possible arguments that are leaving girls from choosing these scientific degrees. Lack of references, or the identity of the persons that we build in the very young ages. There are some studies that also point out the self-confidence of the persons and how we build that in the very first ages with very little children, that are also making some differences and biases that are perceived by our children, that are also influencing their decision later on for their careers. But we can move on to what is going on here, because maybe you have a lot of experience, you are already somehow advanced in your scientific careers, and maybe we can talk a little bit about that. So what do you think is happening there? What was your experience too? Maybe we can start from that. What was your experience? Because sometimes what we see outside and what we have lived, it's also very different. I don't know if that's your case, because you all are succeeding in your careers. So.
Okay, I will give my view on the private sector, because I think the rest of the women attending the roundtable maybe are more on the public sector, and I decided to move to the private sector some years ago. I did a PhD at the same university where I studied, so the Basque Country University. Then I looked for new opportunities, and I also changed subject, which was something like, wow, you have to continue on, on the same path that you chose for your PhD and specialize on that, and you're gonna lose track, no, if you do that. But I wanted to have a more varied vision, if you will, and I decided to do that. So I went to Germany for a postdoc for 2 years, and then I wanted to continue my career in Spain again, so I was looking for opportunities. And at that moment, I wasn't sure about following the scientific career that was established in Spain. I wasn't sure about myself fitting there. So I decided to move to the private sector, but continued in research, okay, maybe more applied research. And there, this was, I was around 30, 32 when I started there. So I really realized that if I had plans to have a family, that was going to come together with my growing phase in my professional career. So I had to figure out how to come to put all this together. I was quite lucky because the company that I was working at, Iden Biotechnology, is a company that has had always a very high presence of women, but that we have also fought to have that and not seeing it and feeling it as a problem. We had a baby boom during those years, and it had never been a problem. We didn't hire new people for those positions because they were very specialized positions, and it didn't matter. I mean, we continue our activity and development as a company. But it's true that that feeling of confronting that period in which you have to balance everything. I mean, you have to take decisions on how you're going to do that. In my case, I was free enough to decide how to do it, but I know it's not always the case. So at that age, one hand could be maternity, of course. Another question is other family responsibilities also, that maybe it's not children, but there are others. And how you decide that you want to live your life at that period will probably have an impact on that. I don't think it has the same impact for men and women.
What do you think? What was your experience?
Well, in my experience, I mean, the university field, and in my case, I worked hard, and then I was getting better positions, and that's a reality. But I totally agree with the fact, which is that for very high-level posts, for sure, you are expected to devote a lot of time, more and more hours, and this is difficult to manage when you have a family. Right? This is not my case, but I can see that everywhere with other colleagues, and then things get very, very, very complicated, right? So I think this is something that we all need to change, because for sure we need to take care of our children, our family, right? And there should be a way we can balance both parts, right? And for women, since we have that caring role, and for sure we want to be mother, and we want to take care of our children, this is being quite serious and quite difficult to deal with, right? And you feel bad because you are, I know my colleagues are, sometimes they feel bad because they think they should be with their children instead of being, I don't know, writing a paper, right? But the reality is that you cannot stop if you want to write a paper and publish it and so on. But for sure you need to get the balance, to find the balance. And I think from the administration and enterprises and so on, things are not very easy, right? They should we should somehow find a way to really make this a reality. I mean, the conciliation reality, which is not. And that's the problem. And that's why many women think, okay, I'm not going to compete because otherwise I am rejecting that personal part, which is I'm going to be a mother. And this is a reality.
Well, my experience is a little bit different because I did the PhD in the US, so I just moved recently here, so I can talk about the US. And I think what happens there is that after the PhD, you can continue your academic career, but honestly, it pays less and it's very competitive. It's difficult to get a job as a professor. So most of the people go to industry, especially in engineering. I mean, I was in California, so you have Facebook, Google, all these companies offering you a lot of money. You know, you can just apply and you get a position, whereas for academia, you have to apply and maybe you don't get into the place that you want. So that's something that I guess why there is this drop. Because over there, in terms of taking care of family, they don't really have maternity leave. So sometimes it may be better. It's true that if you go to a good company, you may be better off in the company because you get your maternity leave and that's it. As a professor, you get some benefits, but you are still expected, you know, if there is a grant, you need to apply for it. If you have a deadline, you have to work on it. So you have benefits, but you are kind of working all the time. So that may be a reason as well to choose industry versus academia.
Yes, I think the question is that, I mean, here there are the percentages, but there is no written the total amount of people in each of these steps. So it's going from a high amount to a very low amount. So, I mean, the positions on the right of this graph are very few. And it's a very competitive career, okay? So, as in any other competition, it would be fair if both women and men could start from the same place, okay? And in some cases, as it has been said here, it's not the case, because probably women, I don't know why, because it is in our genes, or I don't know why, we are maybe more prone to take care of our families, which can be, as it was said, maybe not only children, but parents or grandparents, okay? So maybe the initial position in that career is not the same for women and men, okay? So, I mean, the scientific career is going to congresses, not being at home, writing papers, having, I mean, a lot of work. And maybe that's why this is, the percentages are changing, okay? And maybe there should be okay, of course, there has to be a change in mind in all society. I mean, it cannot be that we have a child and I only take care of him. No, it has to be a shared responsibility. But even though maybe there should be some positive benefits for women, if we want them to be in the same percentage as men in the top positions. Positive discrimination, it's called, but I think in some cases, if we want to have a 50-50, maybe we'll have to do things like this.
Like quotas.
Yeah, or maybe different calls for men and women.
So I think, sure.
Yes, I mean, Polymath is already having a call which is only for women, because at some age, 30 to 40, I mean, women probably have had a child or have had to take care of someone else, and they have not had the same time to devote the time for science. So maybe the way of comparing both CVs has to be different.
So in that sense, I think there should be some, well, in some places there is already something in place. For example, I mean, in the US it's very standard that the universities have some policies for minorities that includes women. So for hiring more women and things like that. But I think so a lot of the problems that we have right now, I think they will be solved slowly as more women go into the academic field. And just to give an example, last year I was in the main conference on computational genomics. My husband works in the same field, so we both traveled together and we have 3 kids. The conference offered childcare for a very, very cheap price for a whole week. And we used it, and it was the only way we could both attend the conference. So I think this problem is going to be, like, more people are going to have this problem, especially because it's also, I mean, I think it's also the case that most of the time you find your partner in your work. So it's very standard that both of you are in the academic career, or you are both engineers, so you have similar lives, and if you have kids, you know, you don't always have the grandparents there. So things like that, I think they will come naturally as we increase the percentage.
I think also regarding the balancing of personal and professional life, there are things that are coming like the paternity leave in Spain, for example, that is being extended. When I think on a general view from it doesn't matter who is the one that is hiring the person, but when you think on a sick leave, you have to, I don't know, be 3 months without working at the lab, and you're not able to write those papers because you are sick, whatever you have, is not seen in the same way as a maternity leave, for example. And then if you have a maternity leave, you have, you know, like the sign, what is going to happen in the next 2-3 years, that baby or child is going to need extra things, and maybe this person is going to need more flexibility. This was very linked, and it is still very linked to the woman right now, but I hope that in a period that probably it will take some years, that men start to use that paternity leave, it will help to put in context that this can happen with both genders. So maybe we reduce that negative view and we start seeing that leave as a normal leave that can happen because of any other reason, and we don't see it in such, you know, like a such important thing to solve, because at the end of the day, this is some months of your life, of your professional life. It's not so important, and if there is really a good balance between the couple in order to be able to to take care, as they were explaining now, of those of the extra things that come along the way, that shouldn't be such a big issue. Okay, but maybe both genders have to be put in that situation, so we don't see it always linked to the woman. So for what you were saying, I think that slowly we will start seeing those changes, but we have to push for them.
Amy?
Yeah, okay. So I just want to add something. I do hope that in the future these things improve. I'm a bit skeptical at that particular level, just because it's, so both men and women, in my experience, leave academia for very much the same reasons. They want stability, they don't want to have this hyper competition. And if you want to succeed, you have to work a lot and you have to have a vision, because in the end, they're very limited, a very, very, very limited number of positions you can actually apply for. And for women, that's exactly in the 30s. And there is something like a biological clock. So yes, that has to be taken into account, and that actually does limit a bit. And also maybe going back to the initial ideas of why girls get told you cannot do it, it's a bit about maybe it's still a bit more ingrained to have this idea of having a social, being maybe more involved in the social activities. And the thing is, if you don't have a very, very clear vision what you want to do in academia, maybe you might actually have more chances to actually move something and change something in your environment if you leave academia. And I think that's also a very good decision. But yeah, I think there is this, at this particular career stage, that hits a very critical age in that regard with family planning, and men do have a lot more flexibility on that. They do have a lot of more leeway, I think, in general, in the socially acceptable thing, but yeah, there's more leeway and more flexibility, and at what age you're actually having children as a man. So.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
You have especially highlighted the maternity aspect or the family planning aspect of that, but I think that there might also be other reasons that we could maybe think about too, because although maternity, we were talking about, we are more or less here in a in a society that at least we have the feeling that we are more equal than maybe in other parts of the world. But we mothers are feeling bad when we stay longer at work than men that are also fathers and maybe are not feeling so bad. I don't know. Do they also feel bad? What is happening there? Because if we are equal, where is that feeling? It's something that it's, do you think it's something in the genes, or it's something that it comes from society, it's education, it's something cultural? Can we act on that somehow?
It is cultural, I think. It is cultural. Because, and I think that it is changing. When you speak, at least in my case, if I speak with my peers at professional level or friends, I think men also now, I think men are realizing that they also have the right not to have to be there just because I am the man. I am not supposed to be, to spend so much family time and she's going to do it, so I can be here. No, I want to be there too. I want to be at home. I want to be with my children. That is changing too. It is not easy for them either because I think, okay, maternity leave is sometimes a problem, seen from the institution or the company point of view, but also paternity leave. So, and any kind of leave that has to do with family care, doesn't have to be children, no? So I think there is a change there. And in our generation and the next generations, we all want to be present with family, and being family, not only children, but family and friends, I mean life, no?
I would like to add something that is not directly related to the family thing, but to the, I think, change that is also happening in science as like the social thing. Again, going back to this particular career stage, postdoc stage, this is also where other things become very important. It's not about doing great research, but it's also being assertive and driving your vision across. And I think, I mean, it's something that is changing, and there is of course a great variety of how men do it and how women do it, and they're very assertive women and they're very timid men as well. But I think the socially acceptable margin to be actually to push for your agenda and how to be assertive and dominant, it can be much more difficult as a woman. So this is also kind of playing in at that. Of course, family planning, I think, might be the major factor in this reduction, because that's just the age where things are happening. But there are other things that are more subtle and more difficult to kind of pin down, that this particular career progression makes it much more difficult. So there are lots of factors. But yeah, I hope things will change.
For sure. Sooner or later.
Talking helps.
Okay, I want to invite you also if you have anything to add or any comment to do. Idoia.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Nora. I've had the opportunity to be the CEO of a biotech company. I work with Xana in Egiten biotechnology. I agree with everything that you are telling. The age, the maternity and family plans are critical points, and I think that one of the most important one. The other thing is that the starting point is completely different for women and for men. But there is another important thing on the other side of the scheme, and it is that the decision makers are mainly men, and we don't have still women references or examples in the board of directors of the companies or in the universities and so on. And unfortunately, this is something that will take a little bit more time to change. But this is very, very critical point in the down of the responsibilities of the women in the presence of the high responsibility positions as well, because the ones that are taking the decisions of who is going to be there are still mainly men. And it's something that has been published by Men's Report, and they tell us as well. We are not used to decide or to choose the women for those positions, and this is something that we need to change.
Hello, I'm a physicist. So
good.
No, I just wanted to mention something. That we talk a lot about maternity and so, but I think, well, there is also a small thing that is important. Is in some fields like mine, we are often, especially, I feel like the more competitive the center is, or the more competitive the environment is, the less women you find, and the ones who are sometimes there are really a minority, and that's already a situation where you are not equal. And it doesn't matter if you don't have any children responsibility or not, you are always going to be a minority, and you're going to be always the outlier. So.
Yes. Anyway, regarding the previous question, opinion, you are right that the policymakers are men, but I think that they are a bit pushed. So they are pushing that when they give you a grant, a big grant, that they start asking you how many PI you have, how many of them are women, and maybe you will have to start getting red when you say that you don't have any. Okay, so that I think they are starting to change things when you apply, at least for public funding. Okay, I don't know for private funding.
Hi, my name is Sophie, and I'm very interested in this subject, so thank you for sharing your experiences. I think that it's very interesting what you're referring to in regards of competition. And I think here at this point we should go back to the first slide. Zientzia told us that it is a very competitive place, science. And if we see any connection
Not sure which one.
Yeah, the one that it said the myths about why girls or young women don't go into science. And maybe you can give us some thoughts on your experience, because I don't think as girls are trained so much into these competitive skills. So it comes from back before. So one thing would be your reflection on how we could maybe change the system, because this has been established, this competitive system has not been established by women, right? It has some characteristics that have been established historically by decision-making men, right? So maybe we don't, at this point where we have to take the decision and where she has shared her experience, it's a very highly competitive, we don't have the tools or the skills of how to build up our ways or push our agenda, like you were saying. So this would be like one question, if you have any experience of this, of how you did, if you ever encountered this thing in your career and how you went through it. And also if you have any thoughts on maybe how we could change like the structure of how things are being valued, so that our interests and perspective is more included in this. Thank you.
Tough questions.
Very good question.
I will try and solve something here, but well, very good question. I think it is very difficult to fix things once you are in the high level, okay? So for me, the solution starts from the very beginning when you are a child, right? So you need to be given a lot of tools for you to develop in as much as possible as a person, being more competitive, which is a very nice thing to be, even if you are a girl, because sometimes you are called bossy because you try to fight and impose your decisions, where maybe boys are called competitive, and that's exactly the same. So, I mean, equality from the very beginning is the solution, right? So I think it starts from having both genders, the same tools, and even the toys you play with when you are very, very young, right? And to develop as a person in a wide variety of fields, right? And perspectives. And I think this would amend all the problems. Yeah, and it is very simple, right? Because the parents and family have it very easy. There are many ways, many tools for your children to experience and live and develop as person in an equilibrium, right? In a balanced way. And but we have to fight against those people telling you cannot do this, you only have to do that, and so on. So if not, this idea of I'm not able to do it, this is very hard for me, this is not my role, then this will finally win, and you cannot be then later very competitive. You have to learn how to do that from the very young age. That's what I think.
I also agree with what you said. Also, I wanted to distinguish that this being very competitive field, I think this is a message that you get after you finish your degree in engineering or mathematics. Like, I've never heard that when I was deciding what to study. So I think that applies for later, what you do once you get your degree. So that's what I wanted to distinguish. Like, for choosing the degree, I think this bias in the society that you should, I mean, it should be assumed that you can study science if you want. And I go back to your previous comment of what is science. Because when I was at school, I remember people saying like, oh, I don't like maths. And then I just have to do arts. And science is not only mathematics. Like, you may hate math, I mean, maybe if you really hate it. But if you are not very good at math or you don't really like it, but, you know, like artistic drawing, I don't know how you call that in English, like for architects, for example, or maybe physics or computer science. You are programming. You don't have to know a lot about mathematics. You need to understand that data structures and things like that, and how to think abstractly how you are going to program something. So I think changing that at an early age is very important, because a lot of people don't like math. And I would like to know, actually, from men who do not like math, how many of those end up doing engineering or something like that, just because they know, oh, I'm going to get a lot of money if I study that, so even if I don't like it a lot, maybe society pushes them to study that. I'm not sure. I would like to know those numbers, actually. And then once you are in academia or in industry, if you are an engineer, if it's a competitive environment, I think being trained from an early time that you can do whatever you want and you can do this, that is very important. And sentences like, oh, boys don't cry and girls do cry, that already, as a girl, is telling you that, oh, you are weaker. Or as a man, they are telling you like, oh, you should not cry, you can do this, you are supposed to be the man and do everything that you have to. So you tend to believe that at the end, if everyone tells you that, right? So when you are in a competitive environment as a man, you feel, oh, yeah, I can do it. Or I will fake it and tell everyone that I can do it, whereas I'm in the inside like, don't think that I can do it. And as a woman, maybe in the outside, you also say, no, I'm not sure I can do that. But everyone feels the same, maybe. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I would like to add to that probably is not only about girls and women learning some of those skills or being able to use them without being a judge, because the bossy thing, I train myself not to say this to my daughter, never ever, because I think it's something that happens very very easily, and it really makes a difference. I mean, they are the bosses, and the boys are just super leaders. So I think that both genders can learn from the other, and then maybe when, because diversity, and not only about gender, but any diversity, is what brings, better values, higher values too. So it's not only male and women, but also, people from different countries, different cultures. All that adds up in terms of value in an institution. So learning from each other how to use those skills will probably leverage the institution into a better position, and it might have an impact on what you were saying about changing the structure of the system and why it has to be so competitive, or how did we arrive to that, and are there any other ways to do that? I mean, can we still be competitive, but from different angles, more collaborative angles, and for that is people bringing different ways of doing things in the institution. So it's both sides. I mean, it's learning women from men in terms of those skills that we were saying that maybe can help us to open that leadership or competitive skills, but also the other way around.
Yeah, I would like to add something on this. So I totally agree that we really have to improve how sciences are specifically perceived by girls and women in science. But I think it's a bit fatal to say, like, we have to start so early, because a lot of the skills that you need as a successful researcher, they can be learned even if you don't have the aptitude, and men do it all the time. So it's not like there is a big secret that you have to unlock very early in your childhood. And it's something, I mean, research, half of the research is learning anyhow, so you have to learn new skills all the time. And just as a concrete example, I see it in writing. Again, there's a huge spread about how cocksure men write and how cocksure women write or don't. And for me, I see that a lot of times it actually depends on the teacher or the PI behind that is kind of was the person who taught the student to write. So I think there's a lot of variety in that. And also the competitiveness. If you have really a goal, and you might not be super comfortable with everything, but again, I don't think all men are always super comfortable with being in a super competitive environment and very under very close scrutiny all the time. It's kind of, yeah, at some point, sometimes you just have to deal with it. And I guess it's the same with being a parent as well. I mean, it's not something that necessarily comes naturally. You have to learn it, and you have to improve, and you have to get feedback, and you have to have people who you can ask for help if something is difficult. And I think that's kind of the networking thing, and it helps. And it's maybe done in a different way for women and men, but there are a lot of things that we can do to make the world better for our daughters, but we can also do a lot of things to make it better for ourselves. So I think, yeah.
Thank you.
I totally agree with trying to change society, but sometimes we have to do it at all levels, otherwise it's a bit too focused.
Oh, sorry.
Hi, thank you for your talk and discussion. And I'm a PhD student here, actually under supervision of Naomi as well. And we focus a lot about the maternity aspect, which I think is also a paternity aspect in the future, hopefully. But that's maybe not one of the problems I see, because when I grow up at least, and if I'm then ending up in the leading position, and I haven't seen girls with me, it's kind of weird. Like what is the qualifications? If I'm constantly surrounded by other males, and then I'm up in a leading position, it's kind of course, I will choose a man because they are like pre-qualified. So I think it's the problems about, I mean, we should focus and start early on, kind of mixing and normalizing the view that everybody can do science, no matter gender or race or whatever type of difference. So more than thinking now, okay, why aren't we pursuing in science? Because obviously if you have a very few that starts, it's kind of hard to keep it up anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah, not really a question or a comment, it was just
I think that we were saying it's what we were saying, no, that that is one of the areas in which we need to work on, and be roles. I mean, roles that you can touch and you can talk to, not Marie Curie in the book that you cannot talk to her. How did you do it? So, I mean, real roles, no, both for boys and girls. But it's true that then, in my opinion, there is also work to do at the other levels, as Naomi was saying that and there are many studies about this and books that have reflected this. I mean, we tend to be, and I think that for years, and I hope that is also evolving. The research institutions have been previously very endogamic, and you might prefer to choose, among what you had very close to you, instead of looking also in other areas, if that is really who is really the best person to come into your team, for example, no. So with a high percentage of men in board of directors or administrative committees or whatever, that happens too. Is a tendency that it is reflected by the numbers, and it's something that we all need to embrace. I mean, diversity, instead of only looking to what I know. What is what I know? What I know is what I have closer. If closer I have 80 or 90% of men, this is where I'm going to choose. So we all need to change that view to look more on a more wider picture. So for me, it's not only acting at that level with daughters or with girls and boys at the school or college, but also later on, and being all open to a change, of course.
I have the feeling that probably most of the people that are in this room are quite convinced about this. We are only more women than men attending this kind of events, not only today, but in general. We have experienced that we are talking among ourselves, and it's good, because it's empowering too. But what feeling do you have of the men around you in your offices or work or environment, conferences, whatever, about this subject? How do you think they perceive it, or they feel threatened, or they... Because I sometimes have the feeling that some are very receptive and that are very willing to get involved in this change, and that others feel very comfortable with the system, because, of course, the system also benefits them. And, well, that's my feeling. What do you think about that?
Well, in my case, I'm very, very comfortable because I can see there is no difference between being a woman or a man in my research group or in my university, at least in the areas I move around. And it is true that maybe for older people, they have the idea that everything is soft. There is nothing to be fighting for, because there is already a balance and everything is okay, and you have the rights and you can study and you can get this post, and there is nothing to do. I don't understand why you are fighting for what, if everything has been achieved. And this is the idea of some of them, right? But for the general case, at least in my experience, there is really the situation is very balanced, and I really feel it is balanced, and I can reach as long as I work, I can reach anything I want if I put all the effort on that, and they are very supportive, men and women, with me in my area, and the rest with others, right? So I think we are, and especially if you go down to younger ages, you can see that there is the thought that for sure women and men are exactly equal, and there is nothing to discuss, and they are very active on that, and they decide freely if you are the best, then even if you are a woman, okay, you have to be here, and I vote for you, and that's my experience.
So in my experience, I haven't encountered discrimination per se for being a woman. What I think happens sometimes when I have discussions with men about positive discrimination, like policies, sometimes they are not in favor of that because, I mean, the main argument is like, if you want to study this, you can just do it. If you want to have this job, you can just apply for it and you just get it. But going back to your previous comment also, I don't think we started at the same time. So there is no equality at this point. So maybe we should have some policies in place to do some, I mean, I don't like it to call it positive discrimination, but I don't know if there is another term for it. But I think there should be policies to facilitate women, getting into academia or getting grants or, I don't know, these kind of policies. I also agree, and I think this is very important, that it's very critical how you, like which policies you put in place. Because I was once at an internship in the US, and I heard this from a guy saying like, at this point, because I know there is positive discrimination for hiring women, when the company hires a woman, I'm not sure if they hire her because she deserves the job or just because she is a woman. And that is very, very bad, for women, right? Because if they hire me in the company, which they did for this short period of time, do I have to prove myself more because I'm a woman? And there may be a lot of men in the room that they think I'm there just because I'm a woman. So I think there should be some policies in place to help women, but we have to be very careful in how we do these policies so that, if they don't end up like getting bad for us, basically. So most of the comments about this, disagreements with women and men, in my case, are based on these policies. Why do we have to do that? Or once you do that they don't really understand what's going on, I think, sometimes. But not personally, I've never had a problem.
Yeah, in my case, being in the academia, I haven't felt any discrimination from my colleagues, okay? It's true that when I had my children and I asked for a reduction of my working time, I saw some skeptical faces, but not only from men, also from some women, okay? So not especially from men, okay? I think it's well accepted. And I think it's going to get better because nowadays from my colleagues, they are also asking for paternity leaves. And it's getting accepted so well. So I think things start changing slowly, okay? Regarding the mentoring side, for my PhD students or maybe just in one case coming from outside Spain, I felt that the guy was a bit upset because we were women. He has 2 women directors. Maybe he would be more happy if he had a man director, okay? But I guess that at the end, he managed and he survived, okay? So I think that's also for us in our mentoring work, to work also with women and men, because both of them, for us, they have to be equal, but not women to men to women too. So I think it's getting better.
So maybe just add my own 2 cents. So especially from very established professors, I've received quite some support and also kind of mentoring or hints what I can do. I guess it's just at the same level, like what was mentioned, the postdocs who compete for the same jobs I want to apply for, and they see there are these special extra years that you get in case you have a child as a woman, if you write grant applications that were added to your academic age, that there are specific grants just for women and so on. Of course, they see this and feel a bit discouraged, maybe. So in that regard, I've seen, it's not opposition, of course, but it's a bit of a difficult situation. But on the other hand, yes, things are changing. So for example, I was 2 years ago at a conference, and the conference included childcare opportunities. And there were some students who joked, like also having a dog care opportunity. And to me, it just showed that the childcare was perceived, at least by the student, as such a normal thing that it was just normal for a conference. For me, it was still pretty much a novelty, and I know that the organizers really took a lot of effort to kind of have it to parents and especially women, but also to fathers, to have this opportunity to have childcare. So I think just having this change in the younger students or the younger generation, that they perceive it's normal, that's actually not such a bad sign.
Okay, so to add a little bit on if I've encountered discrimination in my field, I have to say that the company I am working at, Egiten Biotechnology, is biotechnology, but it's for the ag sector, for agricultural sector. Agriculture is a very male-dominated sector at different levels. Technology development, but of course farm management, and at the end of the day, the last client that a technology or a product would have. And this is worldwide. It's not Spain. This is worldwide. So it's true that for years I felt that the percentage of women attending trades or workshops or conferences, it was very, very small. That has changed a little bit over the years. Not to 50%, 50-50, of course. I encountered myself, having, 2 days of meetings and maybe one meeting with a woman in 2 days of 30 meetings. So that sometimes that could be a little bit difficult, because the way in which we approach the way of doing business also is different. No? It's different between persons, but it's different also between male and female view. So, but I navigated through that, and that I was not feeling any pressure at that moment, but it's true that in some cases you can find, especially from senior roles, a little bit of a patronizing attitude because you're a woman on a very male-oriented sector. And then there was one specific example that was something that was not easy to handle, that it's our board of directors decided that we should try to bring in a senior man on the management committee, so from the outside, the potential investors for the company could feel like more confident on the technology and the company. Luckily, this is something that we rejected to do, but it's something that is real, that happened. So that is something that, of course, made us think why this has to be like this. I mean, there are also examples of women that we could take, senior women on the sector that we could take for the management committee, no?
So you needed a man with a white beard to look very...
Yeah, without hair, if possible.
Sorry, just to add a little bit more to that, I think because this is kind of a cycle, until we don't have equality, a lot of things will happen like that. And I think even women sometimes, and I include myself, we are biased, thinking that guys are better. Because, like in my case, I did the PhD, and most of the people doing the PhD were guys, right? So just by probability, it's more likely that the extremely good PhD students are going to be guys, just because there are more of them, right? Doesn't mean, even if there is extremely good woman, it's just one, right? So just in my mind now, because during my career, I just saw a lot of guys doing the PhD, and some of them were amazing. Now in my mind, I feel that, guys are better at this job, which is not true, right? It's just because the sampling space is smaller for women. So as this becomes 50-50, then, and this is at all levels, right? Like for investors, most of the companies they invest in, the CEOs or CFOs or whatever, they are guys. So in their mind, it's like, there should be a guy there because they know how to do things. Why? Because they have never seen a woman in that position, so they have no idea if a woman can do that job. So I think, it's going to be like it's like a chain of events, but hopefully it becomes better. So that's why I think we have to be a little bit like, I don't know, hands-on on this topic.
There was some...
Yeah, thank you very much. You have all been very inspiring. My name is Maria. I'm a cancer researcher in Biodonostia, and I am also a member of the gender equality at my institution. So we have been talking about many things that we don't, I mean, we can change in long term, but like I have two questions, maybe more focused, like what can we do in our institutions, like maybe in the next years, not easy, but like more short-term measures. And second thing, my main problem is how, because I really think men and women have to work together to change things. And at least in my institute, we find like not all men and not all women, but we find like some people who are really skeptic about all this. So how do we engage those people? Those are my two questions. Thank you.
Well, I think that when you have in front of you, you have that particular case of a woman who is successful. This is the way you have to change the view, right? So I think with initiatives bringing real women in different positions in all fields into your institution is somehow leading to a change, right? When they come, they show you, this is my particular case, I did it like this is how I managed the enterprise or whatever. This is a good thing. I mean, so because as you said, Marie Curie is there in the book, but what, right? So you need a real reference with a real case of success, telling you this is possible, and this is my experience, and there are other women having the same experience. So I think it is very positive if you organize these kind of events in which you can show all the wider range possible, right? In which women are successful. Reality is much more impacting than any other thing. So
I don't know how it's the percentages in your center. I mean, because maybe you are already in a balance. So I mean, if this is not the case, then the figures should convince your
trying to promote.
Maria, take the.
Sorry, yeah. That we are in our institution trying to promote women to. I mean, there are many PIs, but group leaders are mostly men, and like leaders of area or head of the areas are mostly men. So we are trying to make women to progress to those positions, and I see a negative point because like some people are really thinking that we not, I mean, it's not myself, it's like the scientific director, but they are doing this because they are women, not because they deserve it as same as men. So the numbers are not equal yet. I mean, we can see this scissor, at least I think in many institutions. I think you're very privileged, to be honest. And second thing, how do we do it? I think we have to do it having everyone on board. Yeah. Because if not, it's going to be very problematic inside our institution.
This is clear. But I mean, I think that in your area, which is bio area, I mean, the number of graduate students or postdocs is 80% women. So I mean, it is not possible to, let's say, to convince anyone that from 80% of women, then you have only 20% of women in the direction positions. I mean, it's something that there is an imbalance there. So that this should be something that should make think the directors. I mean, of course, there is one thing that it has been mentioned. Maybe women don't want to get to those leading positions. Maybe. But you have to open the doors to those ones who want to get to these leading positions. Okay, so, I mean, the imbalance is clear. The mathematics there are clear. Okay, so there is something going wrong there. And I think there has to be some measures to balance it.
Sorry, to add to what she was saying, I totally agree with numbers. We are science people, so we need to use the numbers, but not only internal numbers. Maybe we need to do also some homework and find outside numbers that show how some procedures and how some quotas, if you will, help to unbalance the situations and take that as a support also for those ideas or for those movements in order to balance. And there is also another thing, and you were saying we need to know if it's true that there are women that want to be in those positions or not. And here I would say two things. One, speak up. If you're a young researcher, if you're a postdoc, if you're in a company, don't think that the one on the other side having the possibility to take a decision to put you on board has to know that you want to be on board. Tell you want to be on board. I want to take this challenge too. Okay, Iñaki, Jose Manuel, and Amelio want to do it. I also want to apply. You have to say it. That is something that sometimes we don't do. We just step back. Don't step back. Say, I want this. Do you think I am prepared for this? Where can I strengthen my CV or wherever to be in a position to fight for this? Ask, talk, speak. That is on one side, and then is the other. You also need to talk with your team. You need to talk with the staff at your institution if you are in a position in which you can take decisions to bring in men or women. Are you interested in this? Or will you be interested in this maybe in 5 years? Because maybe now you are too busy with, personal life, but professional life, but still you want to apply for this in some years. Is this the case? We need more communication there. That is something that men do really good. So we have to learn from that. We have to speak up. We have to be there too. And it's a personal thing, and then as a professional with your team too. So both sides, because I think this is something we forget. We think that, we communicate like dolphins and the one in front of us will know what we want. Well, maybe it doesn't. No, so.
Okay. Thank you. I would like to share two opinions. One is that regarding your what you said, that we did a survey in our institution when we started our gender equality plan, and one of the things that were surprising to me is that, and that I didn't expect originally, was that most women answered that they would like to get higher positions, and that they were prepared, and that they would say yes. One was that. And the other thing is that, as you said, I think it's really painful when you are a boss or you have a high position and people will think that you are there because being a woman. I think it's really painful. And watching how the situation is, how inequality, in which inequality situation we live, I think that we could think in the opposite sense. We could say that maybe men are there because being men, and that it could be painful for them to also. I think that we never think like this. I don't want to be bad, not at all, but I think that we should also start to think about that.
I would like to add also one thing to having everybody on board. As much as possible, but it won't be possible to have everybody on board. Not only in this, I would say in anything in life, you won't be able to convince everybody. So it's good to have as many people as possible. It's good. I am seeing a lot of movement in associations. In our case, for example, one investor group that we had at the company, they are really focused also on this, on having more women in the board of directors, in the different companies that they are investing. There are specific associations doing things for this. ASEBIO, that is the National Biotech Association, is showing real example of women all along this week. I think it's going to be the whole month of women in different roles in biotech companies and institutions, which is good because it's something that you can really share and discuss with friends or family or whatever. But yes, there are examples about this, but you cannot wait until you have everybody on board. Just have enough power for this and move on, and small steps will make it at the end of the day, step by step, but we will arrive there. But I agree that it has to be together. If not, it's not going to happen.
I was just going to say more or less the same. You were saying how to work with the men that are spectacle. Don't work with them. It's going to be impossible to change their mind. But there are a lot of men that they are not skeptical, that they are expecting on trying to know how to proceed, because they don't really know how to do that. Okay? So we need more communication. You don't need everybody on board, but for sure you don't need the skeptical men on board, because they are like a bomb. So get them out and work with all the men that are expecting to learn on how to proceed, because I'm sure that you are going to have a lot of support there, and the other ones will change or not, because sometimes the people didn't change, and sometimes the people has very strange things, way to think.
I wanted to add something about that, because at least in my personal experience in my center, the most acceptable ones are women, and are really, really, really hard on that, and very strong experiences can happen with them, because they are really, really not just not on board. They are just in the other side of the room, and they are not here. And none of the people that are not on board in my institution, I mean, what we were saying, that we organize this, and this is very important, but we are, again, the people that we are already aware. So what I would suggest is get the direction on board. Get the decision-making bodies on board, so that you can answer. This is not something that I decided, or this is not an opinion. This is a statement, and I'm talking about the center. And then we start talking, because otherwise there's nothing. We could organize and get ourselves together once in a year and say, we're all together and we're all agreeing, but if you don't have a plan, like a real gender equality plan, supported by your direction, there's nothing you can do. And it will come or not. But I feel that in my institution, maybe more than half of the staff is not aware. They really think that there's nothing to complain about. They really think that if it doesn't happen, it's because it doesn't have to happen, and if it has, that it will solve somehow magically. But maybe more than a half of the staff. So I'm not talking about them. I'm not talking to them. I'm not talking to them. Like I cannot be worrying about them all the time. We have to move forward, with or without them. No?
Oh, well, as far as
I don't know what else to do. Like otherwise, we will stop doing these things and we will stop trying.
So as far as I can see about the immediate measures, there are different things. So there's, of course, the kind of political aspect of doing the strategy, kind of shaping the strategy of the institution. I guess that requires a bit of lobbying. I have no idea about how to do that. Of course, I think it might be very difficult to absolutely convince the skeptics, and then it would be best to work with the people you can convince and hope that it has the critical mass to kind of put some goals down and actually make them kind of specific and obligatory. I've seen that for kind of strategy papers for different universities, when they say, okay, this is how we want to try to improve the number of women professors, female professors. Question is if it will be kind of done like that, because if you read them carefully, there's usually like some wriggle room around, but at least the will is there. The other thing is like finding out actually within the institute, kind of, I'm not sure if it's feasible or if people would actually attend, but if you do some kind of women's group within an institute, just to actually find out that people want to have, or women want to take on positions. And the only real experience I can share is when I was a PhD student at the ETH Zurich, they had like a mentoring program specifically for women, and they had really good content. So that was sometimes very specific mentoring, like how to write a CV, but we also had like a group of students, or not students, I mean we were all PhDs and postdocs, and we also met on a private, so we were 10 women, and we were meeting again and again, and we also saw the career progression of each other, and that was quite helpful, because sometimes you only need a very small change in your perception to be more comfortable in this competitive environment that science is and probably will remain for the longest part. So yes, sometimes you don't need so much to make things maybe a little bit easier. But that, of course, the mentoring, of course, would be people who will probably go out again, so they won't necessarily remain within your institution. So it's difficult to measure the success of this particular method. So, you know.
Okay, thank you. I think that it's already a bit late, so we will be finishing the session. Thanks to all for contributing here and there too. I wanted to share with you a last sentence that it's from an article of Pilar Calzada. It's disculpen las molestias, so excuse the mess. I took some little extracts, and it says that moving is a transformative experience. We don't move gladly because we just want to. We do it by necessity, or most of the times at least, we do it by necessity. Comfort, laziness, and complacency tend to be conservative, to push you gently to leave things as they are. I feel that this is why we women are at the forefront of this massive move, because it is mostly us who are no longer comfortable in a house that does not adapt to our needs. And I think that this is something that it is also happening in science, but not only, it happens everywhere. So a change, I believe that a change will come, that we are on the way, but I also share that we need to do it all together, not only women, but we need to build this new space, women and men all together, so that we create a space that is comfortable for all of us, and that we can all develop ourselves in this new space. I really like the article, and I wanted to share it with you today.